Hello everyone and welcome back to the next video on becoming a Node.js and NPM expert. In this video, we will be building a simple user interface for a thermostat using my packages SMath and Viridis. My name is Nicola and you can follow this link to my GitHub. Now, depending on where you live in the world, you're using one of two temperature measurement systems. You're probably using Celsius, but there is still one country that likes to be special. Regardless of where you live, the boiling point and freezing points are always the same, but they might have different numbers attached to them. Even though the numbers are different, the quantities that they represent are the same, and we can linearly interpolate for all values from one system to calculate their value in the other system. Enough talking, let's get started. So here we are back in Visual Studio Code. The first thing I'm going to do is just set up the project in the same way like I did in the last video. Alright, so here we are with the initial project setup. I've created package.json that has scripts for start, build, and clean. I've also created a basic index.ts file that just logs a message. And then of course I have my gitignore, my changelog, my readme, and my tsconfig. Since we're going to be building a user interface, first I'm going to create an index.html and some CSS styling rules, and we're going to just test that in the browser just to see if we can get something to show up, and then we can build the backend code for it. So here I've created a basic HTML page just with a title, panel div, and then two divs containing the temperature in Fahrenheit and then the temperature in Celsius. I've also created a range input to use as the set point slider. So I'm going to copy the path of this file and I'll hop over and paste it into my browser and see if we can get something to show up. So right now I'm over at my browser. I'm going to go into the URL bar and paste that path, press enter, and here we go. So we have our temperature in Fahrenheit, Celsius, and then here is our set point slider. So now I'm going to just create some CSS rules just to make things look a little bit prettier, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so I've applied the CSS rules. Let me just refresh the page, and there we go. So I could use a little bit of tweaking, but we have now a prettier looking temperature panel here. And here is the slider once again, which aligns up with the panel. And so now we're going to be writing some JavaScript to set the temperature values and colorize the background. So one limitation of using NPM in the browser is that your JavaScript code unfortunately cannot load Node modules. So what we're going to be doing is using a different compiler called Webpack, and I will show you how to configure that. The first thing that you're going to need is to install it using npm i-d to denote that it's a dev dependency, and we're going to install webpack-cli and press enter to install that. Once that's installed, we're going to create a new file called webpack.config.js. And this file here, which should be in the base folder, is going to contain all of our configuration for Webpack. It's just like tsconfig, but it's going to just look a little bit different. So the first line we're going to say module.exports because our configuration is going to be an object that we export from this file. And you might have noticed this is a JavaScript file, not JSON. So that's one minor change, a minor difference there. So our module.exports is going to contain an object with some configuration options. First of all being our entry point. we're also going to set some rules for how our files are loaded and compiled. And we also want to say what file extensions to resolve using Webpack. This special 3 dots here is just saying resolve all default extensions, which includes JavaScript, JSON, and some other ones. So anyway, we've set up our configuration, and now we can use Webpack to build our project. So what I'm going to do back in package.json, in my build script here, instead of saying tsc, I'm going to run the command webpack --mode, and we're going to run it in development mode. Now when I run this build command, it's going to run Webpack in development mode using this configuration file. So let's just make sure that worked. So it looks like I had an error in my Webpack config file, so I'm just going to hop back over and see. I missed something in resolve. It is actually an object of extensions. So we're going to resolve these file extensions, which is what I missed. So now if I run npm run build, it should again not work. I don't know why this. When I ran Webpack again, it didn't work because I have not installed this TS loader, which is a separate dependency. So the TS loader is like the TypeScript compiler for Webpack. So I'm going to also install that as a dev dependency with npm i-d ts-loader. Enter. And now when I run npm run build, it will finally build successfully. So if I go into dist, I now have this new file, main.js, which is our entry point. And this is the file I'm going to load into my index.html page. And so index.js was just the old build file from when I was running tsc. So I can actually do a npm run clean, npm i, and then npm run build just to clean up that dist directory. Now you can see why this npm run clean is so useful. So now when I open up dist, I only have that main.js file. So real quick, I'm going to go into index.html and include that in. So here we've included our script with the defer tag here, which just says make sure to run the script after the entire page is loaded, because we will be using some inputs from our slider, and we'll be writing outputs to our divs here. Now I can just go back, copy the path of this, and hop over to my browser just to see if the updates worked. So here I'm back at my browser. I'm just going to do a hard refresh, and then I am going to run the inspect tool, and then I'll open up the console here. And here we go, I got my hello world from TypeScript. So one last thing with Webpack is when you are actively developing your project and you make changes, normally you'd have to run this build command every single time. But what we could do instead is in package.json, we could also give the watch command. So when I run build here, it's going to keep Webpack open and watch for changes in files. So if I make a change here, and I save that, you can see it rebuilt immediately, and I'm going to switch back over to my browser, and then in my browser I'll refresh here, and we'll see that those changes worked. So anyway, now that we've got all that working, I'm just going to run a git commit one more time, and then we'll actually get started using those packages. Oh, by the way, if you are in watch mode like this, but you want to stop it, all you have to do is press Control-C in the terminal. So before I install any dependencies, I'm going to just capture some outputs and inputs from the HTML elements in this TypeScript code right here. So what I've done here is I've captured our HTML elements in these 4 variables here. We have our outer panel, our display in Fahrenheit, and our display in Celsius. And I've also have a variable for our set point input element. I've also created an event listener for our set point. Whenever the input value is changed, we're going to capture this variable sp_f for set point in Fahrenheit, which is a number based on the set point value. And then we're going to use that to display the set point temperature in Fahrenheit. So I'm going to build that one more time and then hop over to my browser to see if the changes worked. So here I'm back at the browser. I'm going to hit a refresh one more time and change the value of the slider, which seems to work perfectly. So we have the value updated in our degree F display, but we don't have anything yet in our Celsius. So we're going to install SMath and use those functions in that library to translate from our degree F to our degree C. We're also going to use the Viridis library to colorize the background of this panel. So here I'm back at Visual Studio Code. So what I'm going to do is I will install SMath and Viridis. And I can do that in one command with npm-i SMath Viridis like this. When I press enter, it will just get the latest version of both of those. Before I make any more changes, I just want to do one more git commit to add this snapshot into the history. So now that I've done that, I can import both of those into my index.ts file. So I'm going to do import SMath from SMath, and then we're going to import color and gradient both from the Viridis package here. So first we'll focus on SMath. So what does SMath do? It can help us linearly translate numbers from one number line to another, which is exactly what I was showing at the beginning of this video with the two thermometers showing the boiling and freezing points for each one. So I'm going to create a new variable here for the set point in degree C. And we're going to use SMath to linearly translate using the translate function. What this needs is 5 inputs here. We need the number itself to translate, which will be sp_f. And we need the min and max for this number line with n, and then we need the min and max of the number line that we're translating to. We're going to use the boiling and freezing points because that just makes sense. So I'll use SPF 32 and 212 because this is the freezing and boiling point for Fahrenheit, and then 0 and 100 are the freezing and boiling points for Celsius. So now this value should contain the same temperature, but just converted to degrees Celsius. And so I'm going to do the exact same thing as I did here, but just display it in our degree C element. So here we go with that, and then let me just build that one more time. And then I'll hop right over to my browser to see if that works. So here we are back at the browser. Let me just do a refresh real quick, and then change the slider. And here we go. So now we have both degrees F and degrees C showing for our set point temperature. And now the last thing that we need to do is just colorize the background using the gradient class that we imported from Viridis. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create our own color gradient. We want blue values to represent a cold temperature and red values to represent a hot temperature. So I'm going to create a new variable for gradient. So what gradient requires is an array of colors. So we're going to create that real quick. And what a new color requires is values for red, green, and blue from 0 to 255, where 0 doesn't represent any color at all, and 255 is the maximum. So for example, if you wanted pure blue, you could do 0, 0, 255, where alpha is the transparency, which we're not going to be using. It'll just default to fully opaque. So I'm going to create a red, and I'll create a blue. I'll create a blue, and then here's my red. We can add more than just 2 colors into our gradient, but we'll just start with this just to see how it looks. We're just going to set the background of our panel to the gradient itself. So I've just set the panel.style.background equal to cold hot, which is our gradient, .toString, which will just return a string representation of our gradient. And here we go. When I change the input, we can see that the input still changes, and now we have our gradient background. But this isn't really what we want. We want just a solid color to represent the temperature, and we can do that very easily with the gradient class. Here, instead of calling .toString, we're going to say .getColor, which is another function here that returns a color that we can also call .toString on. So we're going to get a color that's linearly interpolated between a minimum and a maximum value. And what we could do is we can just say that the freezing point is representing our coldest temperature and the boiling point represents our hottest temperature. So we can say our variable is sp_f, anywhere from 32 to 212. Any values beyond 32 will just be blue, and any values beyond 212 will just be red. Now that I have that, I need to make sure I call .toString here as well. Now when I change the values here, we can see that the color actually does change. So this definitely can be fine-tuned a little bit more, and these numbers are a little bit hard to see, so I'll show you how to make it contrast a little bit more. So here I'm just going to capture this color as its own variable. I will just call it background color. And now we can set the background to the background color. Now what we're going to do is set the foreground to a contrasting color. So we can say panel.style.color equals background color dot get contrasting color dot toString. And so what get contrasting color will do is it'll return just the color black or white depending on which one has a better contrast over the background color. So now I'm going to change the slider value, and now we can see that we now have white text on this dark background, which is perfect. So let's just fine-tune the gradient a little bit more just to make it make sense a little bit better, and then I think we'll be pretty much done with this project. Alright, so what I've done is I've just fine-tuned some of the values here just to make the colors look a little bit better, and I've also added an intermediate color. So now we have a color gradient with 3 color stops. I will also change the range for our getColor function to say that anything below 40 degrees is our coldest and anything above 80 degrees is our hottest. And so now here we go. Anything above 80 degrees is going to be that red color. Anything in between is linearly interpolated between those two, or actually those 3 colors rather. And then anything below 40 degrees is that blue color that we defined. So there we have it. This is our simple thermostat user interface using SMath and Viridis. I hope that you found some value out of this video. I'm curious if you install SMath or Viridis, just let me know what you're using it for. And have a great rest of your day.